Hello and welcome back, techies. I am your instructor, Sambhav, and today we are going to see the third part of the vector. This is the last section of the vector. We already have seen other two parts of vector. So if you have not gone through my other two parts of or other two sections of vector, please go ahead and have a look at it. So let's start. So in today's session, we will talk about vector maths. That means we will try to see to perform, we'll try to learn how to perform mathematical operations on vector, and then we will try to see how to create the subset of the vectors. Right? Let's get started. Now, vector maths. So vector math is nothing but you have to perform certain mathematical operations on the vectors. Let's say, for example, we have the even vector here. What if I want to add 100 to each of these elements? What if I want to add 100 to each of these elements? It is pretty simple. All you have to do is even plus 100, right? Now if I execute it, you see it becomes 102, 104, 6, 8, 10, 12 and 120. It is so simple. Let's say, for example, if I am saying, please add 1 to each element of the odd vector, odd plus 1. So what it will do, each element will be added 1. With each element 1 plus 1 2, 3 plus 1 4, 5 plus 1 6, 7 plus 1 8, 9 plus 1 10, and it becomes a even. It is all becoming an even number altogether now. So it is so simple to perform mathematical operations, right? So that is what we can also perform other calculations such as multiply, or you can find the square or something. Let's try doing that. So let's say, for example, if I tell you to multiply each element of the even vector with 2, right? So I will write even into 2. So each element of the even vector will be multiplied by 2. So we'll get 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 and so on and so forth. See, 4, 8, 12. So each element of the vector is being multiplied. We can also find the square. Let's say, for example, I want to find the square of all the elements of the vector even. So we will use an upper cap, which will, so even upper cap 2. So it will find square of each of the even vector. 4. So 4 square is 16, 6 square is 36, 8 square is 64, 10 square is 100, and so on and so forth. Right? Pretty easy. Now, here let us create. So here what we are trying to do is we have added let's say we have done a basic mathematical calculations, let's say by adding 5 or squaring it. What if I have to perform operations on different vectors, among different vectors? Let's say vector 1. Let me create a vector 1 which is from 1 to 10. So this is my vector 1. Let's have a look at it. And let's say I have a vector 2 which is 1 is to 2. So my vector 2 is this. Now what if I want to add vector 1 and vector 2? Vector 1 and vector 2. Let's say, for example, vector 1 plus vector 2. Now what will happen? Let us have a look at it. So this is our vector 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Vector 2. So what will happen? Let's have a look at it. So in this situation, the elements in the corresponding positions will be added. So in the first vector, we have the first element as 1, and in the second vector also the first element is 1. So when we write here vector 1 plus vector 2, so these two elements will get added, so it becomes 2. Similarly, value in the second position from each of the vectors will be added. This is 2. Now what about the rest of the elements? What about the rest of the elements in vector 1? So for the rest of the elements in vector 1, what will happen is these two elements in the vector 2 will be repeated. So this will be added with 1 and 2. Again it will be with 1 and 2. Again 1 and 2. Again 1 and 2. And you will get the corresponding result. So this will become 4. This will become 6. 6, 8, 8, 10, 10, 12. So when there are two elements and the previous vector has got 10 elements, so these two elements will be repeated for rest of the elements in the previous vector. Let's try doing it and see the result. So if I give vector 1 plus vector 2, you will notice that 2, 4, so 1 plus 1, 2, 2 plus 2, 4, and again 3 plus 1, 4 plus 2, 5 plus 1, 6 plus 2, and so on and so forth. This is how it works. Correct? Similarly, we have also created even vector and we have also created odd vector. Correct. Now, can we add these two vectors? Of course, even plus odd. So, individual elements 2 plus 1, 3, 4 plus 3, 7, 6 plus 5, 11, and so on and so forth. We can also do it odd minus even. Pretty easy. Right? Now assume that I am creating a new vector called as vector 3 and I am having value from 1 to 3. Right? So see, this is my vector 1 and this is my vector 3. Now what will happen? How will this calculation be performed? Let's say I want to say vector 1 plus vector 3. Right? Now let's look at this place. So let me now you will notice here that my vector 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. And then we have vector 3 which is 1, 2, 3. And I am asking you what will happen if we try to sum vector 1 and vector 2. Vector 1 plus vector 2. So what will be the result? So again the same process will repeat. Of course it will repeat. 1, 2, 3. It will be repeated. Again 1, 2, 3 will be repeated. Now here is the problem 1. But now in case of repeating, so sorry, this is vector 2. Now here there are two more elements 1, 2, 3, and here there is no element. Now what will happen? Let's see. Let's see what R is going to give me the result. Now if I execute this, R will throw me a message, a warning message. Let's read the message. Longer object length is not a multiple of shorter object length. Now let us look at it, what it is saying. So in the warning message, it says that the length of the longer vector, this is longer vector, vector 1 has got, what is the length of it? It has got 10. What is the length of vector 2? It is 3 because it has got only 3 elements 1, 2 and 3. These are the repeated values. So the actual length of vector 2 is 3. Now the warning message says that the length of the longer vector, the length of the longer vector is not a multiple of the length of the shorter vector. That means it is not a multiple of it. 3 3s are 9 or 3 4s are 12. It is never 10. So whenever you are performing any vector calculation, you must be very careful. So I have mentioned these points. Whenever any mathematical operations are performed on two vectors, make sure, point number 1, both the vectors are of the same length, as we have seen in the previous section, in the previous example, that even and odd. So both the vectors had the same length, 10 and 10. Second, the length of the longer vector must be a multiple of length of the shorter vector. As in the previous example, you might have noticed vector 1 and vector 2. So if I type here vector 1 which is 10 and vector 2 which is 2. So if I give length of vector 1 and length of vector 2, so it is 2. So the length of the longer vector is the multiple of length of the shorter vector. But there is a problem with the third vector, vector 3, right? It is not a multiple. See, 10 is not a multiple of 3. Now what do we do in this situation? Or is it that we cannot perform such kind of calculations? Of course, you will not be able to do mathematical calculations if you do not match the condition. Now, the constraint what we have in R when we are doing mathematical operations on two vector is that the longer object length must be a multiple of the shorter object length, right? Must be a multiple of shorter object length. So what we can do is, there are two options now. There are two things we can do here. Please listen to me very carefully. First option is that either I can add or reduce elements in vector 1 so that it becomes a multiple of the second vector. What I'm trying to say is, see, vector 2 is 3. So if I make the length here as 9, then it will become a multiple and then the vector calculations can be done. But in order to make 9, I will have to remove 10. Another way to match up this with this condition is that we can add two more elements here, right? So that it will become 12. So 4 3s are 12. So again it will become a multiple of it. I wouldn't recommend the first option because we will have to delete these values and we will be actually losing our data point, right? We will be losing this value permanently. So I wouldn't recommend that. It can be done, but I'm not saying that you cannot do it. It can be done, but it is not recommended because you will lose this value. I would recommend to add two new values in the 11th position and in the 12th position so that it will become a multiple. So let's see. Now the question is, if we want to add any two elements here, what should be the elements? It completely depends on you. For example, let's say if I would have been in this situation, I would prefer adding -2 and -3. Why I am doing it? See, the moment I add -2 and -3, when I look into the even vector, sorry, vector 1, by looking at this, I'll be easily be able to identify that it was a negative. These two are negative numbers, so we would have done some manipulation to extend the length. Second, when I'm finding sum, let's assume the sum, I will be getting the result as 0, so it will not affect me. Now, the question is, how do we increase the length of the vector, right? So, the solution for the problem, what we were facing is that we will have to satisfy the condition. That means the multiple of the longer vector must be the the length of the longer vector must be the multiple of the length of the shorter vector. So now we have got to know. Now what to do? Now the question is, how do we increase the length of it? It is pretty simple here, as I have mentioned. So you will have to increment the vector length. Now see what I am doing. Now in the even vector, this is my even vector. Now I have to add two more values to it. Now these values has to be added in which position? It has to be added in 11th position and 12th position. So in order to specify the position, accessing the value of the position, you must notice that I have used a square bracket. Now since there are multiple values, I will use a combine function, right? I will use a combine function. Now after this, I will give the values which I want to add. So I want to add -2 and I want to add -3. Simple. Please look at this. The name of the vector, and then I have specified the position 11 and 12 using the square bracket, and then I have used a combine function, and then I have mentioned whatever I want to add. So I want to add -2 and -3. It is done. Now let's look at this. You would notice that two elements has been added to it, and now if I check the length of the even vector, you will see now it is 12, and we have vector 3 which is 3, so now it will be multiple. Now if I try to sum my vector, okay, I have performed this on even vector, doesn't matter, even vector also works fine. Initially we were dealing with vector 1, so let's say let's do with vector 1 itself to keep it simple. So vector 1, so now we will increase the length of it. So we will say vector 1 square bracket combine. Again we are going to change the value in the 11th position and 12th position, and then combine. And so finally we have to add anything you want. Let's say this time I want to add -2 comma -3, right? So vector 1 is by this value. Now vector 1 plus vector 3. You see, now there is no problem. Finally, this last two value has we got the result as 0 because it has added with 1 and 2 and 3 with minus 2 and 3. I hope this is clear, very simple to understand. So you will have to actually alter the length of it. You can also perform basic, you can use different types of functions. So there are so many functions available here. Let's say for example, if you want to find the sum of even vectors, so you can use sum. If you want to find mean of it, you can find it, right? Square root of even vector. See, there are two negative values we have added, so for them we cannot find the square root. So it is finding the square root of each of the vectors, right? So these kind of mathematical operations, min, max, these are basically functions in R. So you can find minimum value of the even vector, which will be minus 3, and you can also find the maximum value of the even vector, which is 20. Correct? Simple. Now, next thing is that we will learn how to create the subset of the vector. Now guys, creating the subset of the vector is actually related to the previous video, the last one, that is vector part 2. So you remember we were trying to access the value of the vector. There's a second element, third element, fourth element, fifth element, and so on and so forth. Now we were actually accessing the value, but we were actually not storing the result. If we are storing the result in certain vectors, or certain elements, certain object, then it is called a subsetting. Let's say for example, even vector we have, and now let's say I want to access third, fourth, or let's say 1 to 5. So what will I do? I will write even square bracket of 1 is to 5, right? Guys, those who have not seen the previous video, and if you don't know how I'm accessing that, I would request you to go the second part of it. For second part of the vectors video, you will understand this. Now if I want to store the result, I can do it. Result 1, and now you see R1 contains, R1 is another vector which is this value, right? So this is called as subsetting a vector. You create a subset out of the whole. I am creating a subset of the vector, right? Now in sometimes the questions will be like, find out let's say for example in this even vector 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Sometimes the question may be, let me just recreate the entire vector. So let's say this is my even vector. Now assume that if I ask you to find out the elements from the even vector which are multiple of 3. So what it is? 6, 12, 18, these are the multiple of 3. Now how do we do that? So we will specify even. Now in order to find the multiple of 3, so we will use the modulo symbol. Modulo. See, I have used it here. Modulo. Modulo of 3. So you will use 2%, and 3 is equal to 0. Now if I do this, it will return the result as true, false, true, false. Now what exactly does it mean? So what we are doing is, let us understand the modulo. Basically modulo is, let's say for example, I have given, we have a value 6, right? And I want to divide this by 2. So 2 3s are 6, and we get the result as 0. So my modulo is 0, right? Similarly, let's say 8, and we are going to find it by 3. So 3 2s are 6, and the remainder is 0. So we are trying to find this modulo. Now here if you look, I have specified even, and we are trying to find modulo by 3, and we are looking for the result is equal to 0. So you must notice that there are two equal to sign. This is an equality operator, right? So it will always return the value true or false, whether this condition is satisfied or not. So let's say if it is trying to find modulo of 2 by 3, so it is false. Similarly 3, even of 3, the second element 4, again it is false. So 6, it is completely divisible, so 3 by 6, it will give you the result true. So that is what it means. Now but this is just giving me the result as true, false, true, false. It is not giving me what is the value. But the question was, find out the elements from the even vector which are multiple of 3. So I should be actually getting 6, 12 and 18. Correct. Now how do we do that? It is pretty simple. So I will write even and then I will just add a square bracket. So now what will happen? Inside this square bracket we have given this logic. Actually specifying this logic is equivalent to false, false, true, false, 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 true. So what R will do? For whatever value it is false, it will not return the values, and for whichever position we have the value as true, it will return the position. It will return the value. This also we have discussed in the last video. So if you have not seen my last video, please go ahead and see how to access the elements of the vector using the logical reference. Now if I execute this, I will get the value. If I want to create a this is only subsetting, but if I want to store the result, I can store it in a new vector called as, or new object called as R2. Right? See, we have got it 6, 12 and 18. Correct? Well, this is all for today, guys. Thank you so much for your time and patience. You have a wonderful day. And please don't forget to subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that whenever I upload a new video, you will get the notification. If you find that my videos are useful to you, please don't forget to share with your friends. Thank you so much and you have a great day.